The maintenance tunnels of Orbital Station Epsilon 7 were never meant for comfort. Marcus Thorne pulled his worn jacket tighter as he navigated the narrow service corridor, his breath forming small clouds in the recycled air, the storm raging. Outside the station had knocked out 3 atmospheric processors, and the backup heating system struggled to maintain temperature in the outer sectors. At 52, Marcus had learned to appreciate small mercies. 20 years ago, he'd been designing luxury passenger liners with climate-controlled gardens and artificial sunlight. Now he crawled through maintenance shafts, replacing corroded pipes and calibrating air scrubbers. The fall from chief design engineer to station maintenance worker had been gradual, then sudden. Corporate downsizing, they called it. Budget optimization. The words still tasted bitter. His wrist display flickered with a soft blue glow, 1 credit remaining. Enough for a hot meal from the automated dispensary, or maybe a thermal pack for his quarters. The heating unit in his cramped living space had been failing for weeks, and parts requisitions took months to approve. He'd been sleeping in his clothes, huddled under thin regulation blankets that retained about as much warmth as tissue paper. The service tunnel branched ahead, and Marcus took the left passage towards Sector 7. The lighting here was sparse, emergency strips casting long shadows. Between support beams, he was checking pressure readings on a wall-mounted panel when he heard a soft sound. It's barely audible over the station's mechanical hum, like fabric rustling, or perhaps shallow breathing. Marcus paused, listening. Space stations were full of sounds, groaning metal, cycling air, the distant thrum of engines. But this was different. Organic. Human, maybe, though he couldn't be sure. He followed the sound deeper into the tunnel, past redundant power cables and coolant lines. The air grew colder here, and he could see his breath more clearly. Around a bend where the tunnel widened into a small access chamber, he found her. She was curled against the curved wall, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around herself. Her skin was pale blue-white, not from cold but naturally. With delicate silver markings traced along her arms and face like living tattoos, her clothing was little more than tattered fabric, soaked through and clinging to her thin frame. No shoes, no coat, no identification band that Marcus could see. She was clearly not human, though she shared enough features to trigger every protective instinct he possessed. Her ears were slightly pointed, her fingers longer than they should be, and when she lifted her head at his approach, her eyes reflected the tunnel's dim lighting like a nocturnal animal's. "Hey," Marcus said softly, keeping his distance. "Hey. You hurt?" She didn't respond, just watched him with those luminous eyes. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, and he could see her shivering despite her attempt to stay still. Hypothermia, probably, in these outer tunnels, without proper clothing. She wouldn't last much longer. Marcus glanced around the empty corridor. No security cameras here, which meant no official record of their meeting. That could be important later. He looked back at the woman-girl. Maybe it was hard to tell with non-human species in maid. His decision. "I'm going to help you," he said, pulling out his wrist display. "Don't run, okay? I'm not going to hurt you." The dispensary machine was 50 meters back down the main corridor. Marcus jogged through the tunnels, his footsteps echoing off the metal walls. At the machine, he pressed his wrist to the scanner and watched his credit balance drop to 0 as he selected a thermal blanket instead of the meal his empty stomach craved. When he returned, she was exactly where he'd left her, though her eyes tracked his movement as he approached. Carefully, slowly, he unfolded the silvered emergency blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The material was thin but designed to retain body heat, and he saw her unconsciously pull it tighter. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked. This time, she nodded, though. When she tried to stand, her legs nearly gave out. Marcus caught her arm, surprised by how light she felt. Too light. When had she last eaten? "My quarters," he said. "It's not much, but it's warm and private. Can you make it that far?" Another nod. Together, they made their way through the maintenance tunnels, toward the residential sections. She leaned heavily on his arm, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other. Whatever had brought her to this place, she was a survivor, As they walked, Marcus tried not to think about the implications of what he was doing. Harboring an undocumented alien could result in fines, imprisonment, or deportation from the station. But looking at her pale face and the way she clutched the thermal blanket like a lifeline, he knew he couldn't have made any other choice. Some decisions, he reflected, were made not with the head but with whatever remained of the heart. Marcus's quarters were a testament to making do with less. The room was barely 3 meters square, with a fold-down bunk, a tiny food preparation alcove, and a single chair that had seen better decades. The heating unit wheezed in the corner, producing more noise than warmth. But it was private, and right now, that mattered more than comfort. Kira sat wrapped in the thermal blanket on his bunk, her color slowly returning to something closer to normal. The silver markings on her skin had begun to glow faintly, which Marcus took as a good sign. She'd accepted a cup of heated protein broth without speaking, sipping it carefully while her eyes took in every detail of the small space. "I'm Marcus," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "What's your name?" "Kira," she replied, her voice soft with an accent he couldn't place. "Kira Valdris, you are ... kind."
"I'm practical," Marcus corrected gently.
"Leaving you there would have been murder by neglect." She studied him over the rim of the cup. Most would have called security. Security asks questions I don't want to answer. He leaned forward. "Where are you from, Kira?" "In the maintenance tunnels." Her grip tightened on the cup. "An Nexus colony." It was ... sold. The inhabitants were considered part of the assets. The silver markings along her arms pulsed brighter. Whether from emotion or biology, Marcus couldn't tell. Escaped during the transfer. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing heater. Corporate slavery was officially illegal, but asset transfers and labor contracts created gray areas that companies exploited ruthlessly. "How long have you been running? 6 months? 3 stations, 2 cargo freighters, and now here." She set down the empty cup. "They will find me eventually. They always do." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but not today." Over the next few hours, as Kira rested and recovered, Marcus found himself reassessing his small space through her eyes. She noticed things he'd stopped seeing, the way the air circulation system stuttered every few minutes, the slight electrical hum that suggested loose connections, the patches of condensation on the walls that indicated thermal leaks. "You're environmental. Controls are failing," she observed, running her fingers along a wall panel. "The humidity regulation is off by at least 15%. "I know. Maintenance requests take forever, and I can't afford private repairs." Kira stood and examined the heating unit more closely. "May I?" At his nod, she began removing the access panel with practiced movements. "I worked environmental systems on Nexus before." What she found inside the unit made Marcus wince. Corroded connections, clogged filters, and a temperature sensor that had probably been malfunctioning for months. But Kira's hands moved with confident precision, cleaning contacts and adjusting settings with the skill of someone who understood the systems intimately. "There," she said, replacing the panel. "It will run more efficiently now, quieter too." Difference was immediate. The whizzing stopped, replaced by a steady, gentle hum. The air began to feel warmer almost at once. "Thank you," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "Where did you learn to do that?" "Necessity," Kira replied simply. "On Nexus, we maintained our own systems. Corporate oversight was minimal until the sale." They were interrupted by a sharp chime from Marcus's door. "Come!" His blood pressure spiked as he recognized the voice. Security Chief Brock Hendricks, announcing random quarters inspections in this sector. Standard procedure, but Marcus had never felt less standard in his life. "The vent," Kira whispered, already moving. She grabbed the thermal blanket and Marcus's small toolkit. "Can you give me 2 minutes?" Marcus nodded, buying time by slowly answering the door. "Come." "Just a moment, Chief. I'm not decent." By the time he opened the door, Kira had vanished into the ventilation system above his bunk. Taking her few possessions with her, the access grate was perfectly aligned. Showing no sign of disturbance, Chief Hendricks was a large man with a suspicious nature and a talent for making everyone feel guilty of something. He stepped into Marcus's quarters without invitation, his scanner sweeping the small space. Routine check Thorn. Heat signature anomalies in this sector. Hendrix's eyes roamed the room, taking in the improved heating unit, the lack of condensation, the general tidiness. Place looks different. Cleaner. I've been working on improvements, Marcus said truthfully. The heating system was inefficient. Hendrix completed his scan, frowning slightly at the readings. Air quality's improved too. New filters? Found some spare parts in storage? Figured I'd make the best of what I had. The security chief grunted and headed for the door. Good initiative. Keep it up. He paused at the threshold. You hear anything unusual in the maintenance tunnels lately? I've had reports of scavenging. Marcus kept his expression neutral. Nothing unusual, but I'll keep an ear out. After Hendrix left, Marcus waited a full 10 minutes before speaking to the ceiling. All clear. The vent grate shifted, and Kira emerged with fluid grace, dropping silently to the floor. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and she was breathing more heavily than normal. Are you all right? Marcus asked. The vent system has poor air circulation, she said, steadying herself against the wall. My species requires more oxygen than humans during stress. Marcus realized how much trust she'd placed in him by hiding in a space that was essentially a death trap for her physiology. I won't let them find you, he said quietly. Kira met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd found her, she smiled. It transformed her face completely, making her look younger and somehow more present. I believe you, she said, as they settled in for the night. Marcus on the floor again. Insisting Kira take the bunk, he realized that helping her was changing him. For the first time in years, he felt useful for something more important than maintaining someone else's machinery. He was protecting something precious, something irreplaceable. Outside his quarters, the station hummed with its endless mechanical rhythms. But inside, for the first time in months, Marcus felt truly warm. 3 days passed in careful routine. Marcus continued his maintenance duties, while Kira remained hidden in his quarters, using the time to quietly improve every system she could access. His small living space was transforming into a model of efficiency, better air circulation, optimal temperature control, and even a jury-rigged water purifier that turned the station's recycled supply into something almost pleasant to drink. They developed a rhythm of communication. Marcus would share station gossip and rumors during meals, while Kira taught him about her people's technology and their philosophy of environmental harmony. She was from a species called the Valdani, originally from a world where every resource was precious and waste was considered a form of violence. Your human stations are built for replacement, not repair, she observed while fine-tuning his communication panel. Everything is designed to break and be thrown away. It's cheaper that way, Marcus said. At least in the short term. Thinking is what destroyed my world's first civilization, Kira replied softly. They poisoned their own air before they learned to travel between stars. It was during one of these quiet conversations that Marcus's door chimed with an official override code. Not security this time, something higher up the chain. Marcus's blood ran cold as he recognized the authoritative tone of Inspector Vera Castillo from corporate enforcement. Mr. Thorne, please open the door immediately. This is an official inspection regarding harboring fugitive assets. Kira was already moving, gathering her few possessions and the makeshift tools she'd been using. But there was no time for the usual hiding spot. Castillo's scanners would be more sophisticated than the security chief's equipment. The main ventilation shaft, Kira whispered, pointing to a larger grate near the ceiling. I can reach the central air processing unit. That's too far, Marcus protested. If something goes wrong, it won't. She was already climbing, using the wall panels and pipe fixtures with practiced ease. I can slow my metabolism, reduce my heat signature, but I need at least 30 minutes. The grating closed behind her, just as Inspector Castillo's override sequence completed. The door slid open to reveal a stern woman in a crisp uniform, flanked by 2 enforcement officers carrying sophisticated scanning equipment. Mr. Thorne, Castillo said, stepping into the quarters without invitation. I'm Inspector Castillo, Corporate Asset Recovery Division. We're investigating reports of an escaped Valdani female who may have taken refuge in this sector. Marcus forced himself to remain calm. I haven't seen any non-humans in the residential areas, Inspector. Just the usual station crew. Castillo's eyes swept the room, taking in the obviously improved systems and the general organization. Your quarters appeared to be in excellent condition. For this sector, recent renovations. I've been working on efficiency improvements in my spare time, Marcus said truthfully. Maintenance engineering habits die hard. One of the officers was running a detailed bioscanner over every surface. Marcus tried not to think about what Kira was enduring in the ventilation system, forcing her body into an unnatural state to avoid detection. 30 minutes, she'd said. It had been perhaps 5. Tell me about your work history, Mr. Thorne, Castillo said, settling into his chair as if she planned to stay. Former chief design engineer for Stellar Dynamics. Impressive resume. Brings a man of your qualifications to maintenance work? Marcus knew this was a test. Corporate enforcement loved psychological pressure, the slow build of tension designed to make people reveal secrets. Budget cuts, he said simply. The industry. Move toward automated design systems. Human creativity became redundant. Bitter about that? Practical about it, Marcus corrected. I needed work. Station needed maintenance. It was a good fit. The bioscanner officer shook his head at Castillo. No secondary biological traces, Inspector. Standard human readings only. Atmospheric analysis. Clean. Slightly improved air quality, actually. It's better than standard for this sector. 15 minutes. Marcus could feel sweat gathering at the base of his neck, despite the perfect temperature control. How long could Kira maintain her reduced metabolism? What happened if she passed out in the ventilation system? Castillo stood and walked to the heating unit, examining Kira's modifications with professional interest. You've done excellent work here. These improvements must have taken considerable skill. I had time and access to spare parts, Marcus said. Where did you acquire your knowledge of Valdani environmental systems? The question hit like a physical blow, but Marcus kept his expression neutral. Not familiar with any specific Valdani technology, Inspector. These are standard efficiency modifications. Castillo smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Interesting, because this particular configuration of airflow optimization is distinctly Valdani in origin. It appears in their colonial habitat designs throughout the outer systems. Marcus felt the trap closing around him, but he stuck to his story. Developed these modifications through trial and error. If they happen to resemble alien technology, that's coincidence. Perhaps Castillo activated a handheld scanner and pointed it directly at the ventilation grate. Or perhaps you've been receiving assistance from someone with intimate knowledge. Of these systems, 25 minutes. Marcus watched the scanner's display, praying that Kira's biological suppression was holding. The device showed normal airflow patterns, standard atmospheric readings, no biosignatures beyond typical bacterial presence. Nothing unusual, the second officer reported. Castillo frowned and lowered the scanner. She walked slowly around the small quarters one more time, her trained eyes searching for any detail that seemed out of place. Her gaze lingered on the perfectly organized toolkit. The slightly too clean surfaces, the subtle signs of recent occupancy by someone other than Marcus. Mr. Thorne, she said finally, I want you to understand that harboring escaped corporate assets is a serious crime. The penalties include imprisonment, substantial fines, and permanent blacklisting from all corporate facilities. I understand, Inspector. I also want you to understand that we will find this individual with or without your cooperation. Valdani biosignatures are distinct. We have scanners that can detect their presence from weeks ago. She paused. However, those who cooperate with recovery efforts often find their own circumstances ... improved. Marcus met her gaze steadily. If I see anything unusual, I'll report it immediately. Castillo studied him for a long moment, then gestured to her officers. We'll be conducting random sweeps of this sector for the next several days. I suggest you keep that in mind. After they left, Marcus waited another 20 minutes before speaking to the ventilation grate. Kira, are you all right? There was no immediate response, and panic began to build in his chest. Then the grate shifted slightly, and Kira's voice came through, weak but steady. "Still here, but I need help getting down." When she finally emerged, her skin was pale gray and her movements were unsteady. Marcus caught her as she dropped from the grate, her body feeling unnaturally cold. "How long?" she whispered. "What?" "Minutes total? Too long." She leaned against him, breathing heavily. "But we're safe. For now, it is." Marcus helped her to the bunk and wrapped her in the thermal blanket, realized that their situation had fundamentally changed. Castillo wasn't going to give up, and her next visit would likely involve more sophisticated equipment and longer searches. "We need to get you off the station," he said quietly. Kira nodded weakly. "I know someone who might help, but it will require trust." "In who?" "In each other," she said, meeting his eyes. "What I'm about to ask, ... It could destroy both our lives. If it goes wrong..." Marcus thought about his small, careful existence on the station, his quiet routine of maintenance and solitude. Then he looked at Kira, this remarkable woman who had brightened his quarters and his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. "Tell me what you need," he said. The underground market existed in the spaces between official station activities, abandoned cargo bays, unused maintenance areas, and forgotten storage compartments where the security sensors had convenient blind spots. Marcus had heard rumors of its existence but never had reason to seek it out. Now, following Kira's whispered directions through a maze of service corridors, he realized how much of the station's real life happened in shadows. "Are you certain about this?" Marcus asked as they paused at a junction marked only by a small symbol scratched into the wall, 3 interconnected circles that meant nothing to him but seemed significant to Kira. "Captain Reeves has been smuggling people and supplies for 20 years, she replied, checking around the corner before they continued. "He helped my cousin escape from the Meridian labor camps. If anyone can get us off this station undetected, it's him." They emerged into a larger space that had once been a shuttle bay, but now served as an impromptu bazaar. Vendors had set up makeshift stalls selling everything from black market medical supplies to untraceable communication devices. The lighting was dim and warm, creating pools of amber illumination between deep shadows. The air smelled of exotic foods, engine lubricants, and the ozone scent of illegal power cells. Marcus stayed close to Kira as they navigated between the stalls, drawing curious glances from the diverse crowd. Humans mingled with half a dozen other species, all united by the understanding that sometimes survival required operating outside official channels. They found Captain Nolan Reeves exactly where Kira expected, a table in the back corner, playing cards with 3 other spacers while keeping one eye on the crowd. He was a weathered man in his 60s, with graying hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of deep tan that came from years of working in artificial sunlight. When he saw Kira approaching, his face broke into a genuine smile. "I'll be damned," Reeves said, standing to embrace her. "Kira Valdris. Your cousin said you'd gone underground after the Nexus business?" "Hello, Captain," Kira said, returning his hug. "I need passage off station. Discreet passage." Reeves's expression sobered as he noticed the tension in her posture and the way. Marcus was watching the crowd for threats, corporate enforcement. He asked quietly. "Castillo herself," Marcus confirmed. "They've been here 3 days running sweeps." "Shit." Reeves gestured for them to sit. "Castillo doesn't give up easy. You must have really rattled someone's cage to get her personal attention." He looked between them. "Both of you." "Marcus has been helping me," Kira explained. "Now they suspect him too." Reeves studied Marcus with the appraising look of someone who'd spent decades judging character under pressure. "You willing to burn your life here for her?" he asked bluntly. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Already have." "Good." Reeves leaned back in his chair. "Because once you're on my ship, there's no going back to your old life." Corporate enforcement has long memories and longer reach. They were interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. The market's usual hum of conversation died as everyone turned to see a young woman arguing with one of the vendors. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but the tension was obvious. "That's Joss Petrov," Reeves said quietly. Best forger in 3. Sectas, but she's got a mouth that gets her in trouble. The argument escalated, and Marcus could see the vendor reaching for something beneath his counter. Without thinking, he stood and walked over to intervene. "The problem here?" he asked mildly, stepping between Joss and the increasingly aggressive vendor. Joss turned to face him, and Marcus was surprised by how young she was, barely into her 20s. With short, cropped auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that blazed with indignation, "This asshole is trying to charge me triple rate for a basic identity scrambler," she said. Claims it's because of increased enforcement presence. The vendor, a heavy-set human with cybernetic arm modifications, glared at Marcus.
House.
"Market prices. Friend, supply and demand." "Funny," Marcus said, examining the device on the counter. "This is standard station maintenance equipment, isn't it? I could probably pull 3 of these from the repair depot for free." The vendor's expression shifted from aggressive to calculating. "You maintenance?" 20 years, Marcus said truthfully. "Both civilian and corporate." The vendor looked at Joss, then back at Marcus. "Tell you what, your girlfriend here does some work for me. I'll give her the scrambler at cost." "What kind of work?" Joss asked suspiciously. "I've got some corporate enforcement scanning equipment that needs ... modification. Someone with your skills could make it so it can't detect certain biosignatures." Marcus felt Kira tense behind him. This could be exactly what they needed, but it was also incredibly dangerous. "What's the time frame?" Joss asked. 2 hours, and I need it to look like normal wear and tear, not deliberate sabotage." Joss glanced at Marcus, who gave her a subtle nod. "Done," she said. "But I want the scrambler plus 500 credits." "Deal." As they walked back to Reeves's table, Joss fell into step beside them. "Thanks for the backup," she said to Marcus. "I'm Joss." "Marcus." "And that's Kira and Captain Reeves." Joss's eyes widened slightly as she registered Kira's non-human features. "Oh," she said quietly. "Corporate asset recovery." "Among other things," Kira confirmed. "Well, shit." Joss sat down at the table without invitation. "In that case, you're going to need more than just passage off station. You'll need completely new identities, clean backgrounds, and documentation that can stand up to deep scanning." "Can you provide that?" Reeves asked. "I can, but it'll cost. And I'll need biological samples for the bioencryption." She looked at Marcus and Kira. "You two planning to stay together?" Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but Kira answered without hesitation. "Yes. Good. Couple documentation is actually easier to fabricate than individual records. Less scrutiny on domestic partnerships." Joss pulled out a small scanner. "I'll need to take readings now, before you leave the station. The work will take about a week." "We don't have a week," Marcus said. "Castillo is closing in." "Then we need a distraction," Reeves said thoughtfully. "Something to occupy enforcement. Attention while Joss works, and I prep for departure." Over the next hour, they developed a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. Joss would sabotage the enforcement scanning equipment, making it unreliable for several days. Meanwhile, Reeves would stage a fake smuggling operation in another sector. Drawing security attention away from their real activities, Marcus and Kira would remain hidden in the market, where the community would protect them from random sweeps. "One problem," Joss said as they finalized the details. "Castillo posted a bounty this morning. It's 50,000 credits for information leading to the capture of a Valdani female, aged 25 to 30, with silver biomarkings." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. 50,000 credits was more money than most station workers saw in 5 years. "How long before someone talks?" "Longer than you think," Reeves said grimly. "But not long enough. We move tonight." As they prepared to separate and begin their respective tasks, Kira caught Marcus's arm. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "Once we leave, you can never come back. You'll be a fugitive too." Marcus looked around the underground market, at the community of people who had chosen freedom over security, purpose over comfort. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. "I'm sure," he said. "Let's go." 6 months later, Marcus woke to the sound of atmospheric processors humming their morning cycle. Through the reinforced window of their shared habitat module, He could see the rust-colored surface of asteroid Ceres Delta stretching toward, horizon dominated by the glowing bulk of Jupiter. The mining settlement of Haven's Rest clung to the asteroid's surface like a stubborn lichen, its dome structures connected by reinforced tunnels that protected the inhabitants from cosmic radiation. And the occasional micrometeor? Kira was already awake, sitting at their small kitchen table with a cup of synthesized coffee and a tablet displaying the day's environmental readings. Her silver markings glowed softly in the artificial dawn light, pulsing with the steady rhythm that Marcus had learned indicated contentment. She'd gained weight since their arrival, and the constant tension that had marked her features during their escape had been replaced by something approaching peace. "The atmospheric recyclers in Section C are running hot again," she said without. Looking up, "I think the bacterial cultures need rebalancing." Marcus poured himself coffee and sat across from her, automatically checking the construction schedule on his own tablet. "I can take a look after the morning briefing. The new habitat. Expansion is ahead of schedule, so I have time." It had taken them 3 weeks of travel aboard Captain Reeves's ship to reach Ceres Delta, hiding in cargo containers and existing on recycled air and protein bars. But Dane Wolfe, the settlement coordinator, had welcomed them with the pragmatic enthusiasm of someone who understood that skilled people were more valuable than legal documentation. "You can design living spaces?" Wolfe had asked during their first meeting. A pragmatic man in his 40s with the weathered hands of someone who'd spent years building rather than managing. "And you can optimize environmental systems within?" A week Marcus had been put in charge of expanding the settlement's residential areas, designing habitats that maximized both efficiency and psychological comfort. Kira had taken over the environmental management systems, implementing Valdani techniques that had increased air quality and reduced resource consumption by 30%. "The Hendricks family wants to extend their module for the new baby," Marcus said, reviewing his notes. "And the mining crews are requesting better noise dampening in the dormitory sections." "Growing pains?" Kira observed with a smile.
Ow.
"Remember when you thought 50 people was too many for this rock?" The settlement had indeed grown, from 37 original inhabitants to nearly 200. Word had spread through the outer colonies about a place where skills mattered more than documentation, where people could build something lasting without corporate oversight. They were attracting engineers, farmers, technicians, and other refugees from corporate downsizing and legal complications. Marcus was reviewing the atmospheric processing schedule when his communicator chimed with an incoming message from Wolfe. The settlement coordinator's voice was tense with controlled urgency. "Marcus, Kira, please report to the command center. Immediately, we have visitors." They exchanged glances across the table. Visitors were rare this far out, and unannounced visitors were usually trouble. Marcus grabbed his jacket while Kira secured her tablet and checked that her emergency kit was still attached to her belt-hold habits from their fugitive days. The command center was built into the asteroid's natural cave system, providing both protection and natural radiation shielding. When they arrived, they found Wolfe standing before the main display screen, which showed a sleek corporate enforcement vessel holding position just outside the asteroid's defense perimeter. "They arrived 20 minutes ago," Wolfe explained. "Without preamble, demanding permission to conduct a manhunt operation for escaped corporate assets." On the screen, Marcus could see the familiar angular hull design of a Castello-class enforcement cruiser. His stomach clenched as he recognized the specific configuration. "That's Inspector Castillo's ship," he said quietly. "I figured as much," Wolfe replied. "Abide. She's been very insistent about her legal authority to search our settlement." Kira stepped closer to the display, her markings pulsing with the rapid rhythm that indicated stress or anger. "What did you tell her?" "That Haven's Rest is an independent settlement operating under Asteroid Mining Consortium Charter 7749 Delta. And that corporate enforcement has no jurisdiction here without specific warrants issued by the consortium authority." Wolfe smiled. Grimly, she wasn't pleased. The communicator crackled with an incoming transmission. Inspector Castillo's voice filled the command center, as coldly professional as Marcus remembered. "Settlement Coordinator Wolfe, this is Inspector Castillo of Corporate Asset Recovery Division. I am ordering you to surrender the Valdani female." known as Kira Valdris and her human accomplice, Marcus Thorne. Failure to comply will result in sanctions against your entire operation. Wolf gestured for Marcus and Kira to remain silent, then activated the transmitter. Inspector Castillo, as I explained, you have no jurisdiction in this system without proper warrants. If you wish to make formal accusations against settlement residents, you'll need to file appropriate paperwork with the Mining Consortium Authority. Don't play games with me, Wolf. I know they're there. Surrender them now, and I'll overlook the harboring charges against your settlement. Before Wolf could respond, the command center doors opened and a dozen other settlement residents filed. Marcus recognized engineers, miners, technicians, and farmers, people whose lives had been improved by the habitat, designs, and environmental systems he and Kira had implemented. Tell her no, said Helena Vasquez, the chief mining engineer. Marcus redesigned our living spaces so my kids actually have room to play. We're not giving him up. The air purification systems Kira installed cut our respiratory illness rate by 60%, added Dr. Sarah Chen, the settlement's medical officer. She stays. They spoke of improved living conditions, better resource efficiency, reduced maintenance costs, and the dozens of small innovations that had made Haven's Rest feel more like home and less like an industrial outpost. Wolf listened to each voice, then turned back to the communicator. Inspector Castillo, you have your answer. The people of Haven's Rest stand together. If you want to take any of our residents, you'll have to fight for them. Followed stretched for long minutes. Finally, Castillo's voice returned, ice-cold with controlled fury. This isn't over, Wolf. Corporate memory is long, and we don't forget those who interfere with asset recovery, noted Wolf replied calmly. Have a safe journey back to corporate space. The enforcement vessel remained in position for another hour before finally engaging its engines and disappearing into the starfield. Marcus watched it go with mixed emotions, relief at their immediate safety, but also the knowledge that they would always be looking over their shoulders. That evening, Marcus and Kira stood on the observation deck of their habitat module, watching Jupiter's great red spot rotate slowly across the gas giant's face. The asteroid's low gravity made it easy to float near the reinforced window, holding each other as they contemplated their new life. Do you regret it? Kira asked quietly. Giving up your old life for this? Marcus considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely maintenance worker living in a tiny quarters on a corporate station, going through the motions of an existence without purpose or connection. Now he designed homes where families could grow, worked alongside people who valued his skills and shared his life with someone who challenged him to be better than he'd ever imagined possible. No, he said finally. I regret that it took me so long to find something worth fighting for. Kira's markings pulsed with warm golden light as she smiled. You saved my life in that maintenance tunnel. But I think maybe I saved yours too. As they watched the stars wheel overhead, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple choice: spend his last credit on food for himself or warmth for a stranger. That single act of compassion had led to everything else: the hiding, the escape, the new identities, and finally, this strange, wonderful life they were building together on a rock in space. Below them, the lights of Haven's Rest twinkled like terrestrial city streets, each glow representing a family, a dream, a small piece of humanity's endless expansion into the cosmos. And somewhere in those lights were the homes Marcus had designed and the environmental systems Kira had optimized. Their combined skills creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. What now? Kira asked. Marcus smiled and pulled her closer. Now we build something that lasts. Outside, the stars burned with cold fire, but inside their small module, surrounded by the warmth they'd created together, the future felt bright and full of possibilities.